Hi there, my name's Steve Reece, and I run a toy and game business consultancy called Kid Brands Insight. Check out my website for more details on how we've helped hundreds of toy and game startups just like yours at kidsbrandinsight.com. And yeah, I guess, look, for me, I've been working in the toy business for 25 years, and one of my missions is to help more than 1,000 startups achieve sustainable success in the world of toys and games. Basically, I want to share what I've learned with you, and I'd like to see your success. That's pretty much what I'm all about professionally. So over the past nearly decade and a half since I left working for corporate toy companies and started to work for myself, I've advised more than 200 startups in the world of toys and non-digital games. It's been joyful to celebrate the success of many of those companies, and obviously, some of those people didn't make it, some of those companies didn't make it because that's how the world of startups goes. Attrition and failure are all part of the journey for entrepreneurs in this space. But I've been reviewing my notes, and there are some observations that I can share, which I'm going to run through with you. And there's some recurring advice I've given over time repeatedly, which highlights some, ongoing patterns in successful startups. So here we go. Here's my 10 top tips for toy and game startups. That's quite a mouthful, but thankfully I got through it. Okay, so the first one is time versus patience. Okay. So basically, I would summarize this as hurry up and wait, basically. Okay. So first things first, you have to get real about how long it takes to build a new toy game company. We operate in a business with a primarily annual sales cycle. And what that means is that one go around is a whole year of your life. Now, even if you're running the best startup in human history, which I'm sorry to say is very unlikely, no offense intended, it's going to take you years to build your company to, A, any level of success, and B, like years longer to get anywhere near maturity. New market entrants often come into the toy and game business expecting to break all the rules and disrupt the market and so on, because like that's what you read in entrepreneur books nowadays, and that's what people think they have to do. But look, the bottom line is this: you can break quite a few of the old rules today from like back in the day when I started, nearly a quarter of a century ago, and you can be successful. You can even go in effect direct to consumer via Amazon and cut out all the retailers and all that kind of fun stuff. And you can hit as much as, a quarter or a third of the market, which you couldn't have done historically. But the thing is, if your business plan fundamentally requires you to get listed in Walmart across the USA in year one, and to start that process of selling into them whenever you feel like you're ready, like versus when they are ready themselves, where the way their process works, then look, it just doesn't work that way. I'm telling you for certain it doesn't work that way. The couple hundred companies that I've advised, it's never once worked like that, regardless of how disruptive the company, their product, or the concept that they had was. And I've seen really successful business people who've succeeded elsewhere screw up badly their entry into the toy business by failing to plan for the reality of the sales cycle and the time needed to set up sales distribution. So here's the bottom line. Don't give up your day job unless you can afford to live on your savings for like 3 years. And even when you're successful in this world of toys and games and your business is growing, your business will be to money what like a famished teenager is to the cookie jar in your kitchen. Basically, it's greedy and never satiated. Okay, so I'm going to talk about cash flow more in a minute. But just be prepared for the fact that setting up sales and distribution in the world of toys is going to take a lot longer than you want it to. Number two, validate your products early, cheaply, and quickly. This is so important. I can't underestimate how important this is. So look, we all understand that you think your product is absolutely amazing, and you think that everybody's going to want it, and maybe you can't understand why everyone hasn't already snatched your hand off to buy it. The thing is, like, it's important that you feel like that to start with because the process of trying to sell it in is quite grinding. And I speak as someone who had no grey hair before I started trying to sell things in the world of toys and games, and now I have lots of grey hair. Even if you love the product, like you're going to get ground down. Look, if you're lukewarm to the product at the start, you can expect all your hope to be crushed quite quickly by a cruel world where there are thousands of products to choose from, and where yours is basically much less interesting and unique for all the professional buyers you're going to try and sell it to than it is for you. And the reality here is this, like having been an occasional deluded product inventor and developer myself a few times, and having spoken to many hundreds of creators and innovators over the years, the successful ones do this. A, they validate their products and the potential appeal of their products as early and quickly as they can with people whose opinions actually matter. And B, they move on from emotional commitment to their creations and onto hard-nosed selling mode quickly after creating. And by the way, hard-nosed selling is not just trying to railroad someone into buying, it's about listening and adapting your approach. And C, they'll ditch those products which the market clearly doesn't want, where there's valid reasons for that. So let's be clear here, right? So anyone who's been around a long time in this business, like I have, alas, has seen someone flogging what looked like a dead horse. And they've done it year after year after year, and everyone goes, oh, that's the guy with this or the guy with that. And then, you see them heroically make it after a decade or 20 years of effort, and focus, but also have lost opportunity elsewhere. So it isn't really the best way to do it because, like, even if you have something that's actually really good, the market won't, I mean, normally won't automatically embrace it. It takes lots of effort and grind and persistence. Okay. And like, I'm not going to underestimate that because I've been through the startup journey several times myself. It is really hard. But the trick is to be persistent enough to get what you're trying to sell in front of enough of the right people to validate or not validate the product. That's the first milestone that you have to hit. Don't be persistent in a bloody minded, masochistic way. If you're like incredible persistence would be more effective on a different product or even in a different industry. So look, across the last 15 years or so of advising startups in the world of toys and games, I've seen more than you would expect. People mortgaging their homes or taking on like life-altering levels of debt to chase a dream that, is ultimately unlikely to be achieved. And I could have told them that before they took out a mortgage or spent all the money, this is not a brilliant idea because, and at least then they could have taken that on board and adapted it. So, just say above all else, please validate whatever it is you want to bring to market as soon as you can before you incur heavy expense. Now, if your next thought is, well, how do you validate it? There's a few ways you can do this. The first one is, the most obvious one is the target recipient. Go and test your product or the concept or whatever you have available to test with like at least a dozen people who fairly represent a cross section of the kind of consumer that your product's aimed at or that you think it's aimed at. Okay, your family are fine to start with, but really you should seek out the most cynical, hard to please people you know. You want people who will take great pride in being blunt or even like rude about your product and excuse me being vulgar will take great delight in trying to piss on your bonfire because if you can get past their scrutiny you might just be onto something. The second way you can validate it is with a target purchaser. So, it might be different from the actual recipient. It could be a parent or a grandparent. It might be a spouse. But if you talk to both the purchaser and the recipient, like you're actually got a fair chance to validate. So if you, for example, if you've got an amazing product that the recipient really wants, but it costs $5,000, then the recipient's going to love it, but the purchaser's going to be like, what have you been smoking to try and sell a product at that price? So you have to try and validate with both of those. And then the third thing is, unless you're trying to go direct to consumer, which is a whole other world, if you want to sell eventually into retailers, look, maybe you're lucky and you related to or you know someone who is a major retail buyer who's going to give you the time of day. But that's pretty unlikely, I would say. So I suggest that if you're really serious about this, before you start incurring lots of money, go and talk to some independent retailers in the space you're looking to enter. These people are clearly passionately committed to this business and usually love the products. You couldn't do what they do if you weren't. Well, not couldn't, but you probably wouldn't. They know consumers and they know how established toy and games companies think and operate. So, if you ever manage to get a meeting with a mass market buyer, and that's the first retail buyer of any kind you've ever spoken to, you've really screwed up already. You have to learn the game from the ground up, and make your mistakes before it becomes critical. Find a way to get retail validation or rejection of your products before you jump on board a train, which, might not stop for a decade or it might crash like horribly, deeply wounding all on board. And that's not just like metaphor or hyperbole. Like I've done both um, super successful and massively unsuccessful startups myself. And the former made me euphoric and made me think I could walk on water. And the latter caused me very deep emotional stress, which, just being honest, took me years to get over. Um, your local independent retailer, they're going to be very approachable compared with a mass market buyer, and they'll give you more time than you merit in terms of what you can do for their business quite often. Don't waste their time, respect them, but just go and ask their opinion. And at the very least, they should be willing to give you their opinion. And if they're not, then find someone else who is. And just remember though, if you do, kind of help like get these people to work as a stepping stone for you, make sure you remember and celebrate them if you make it big. Um, Okay, so top tip number three is to adapt to market demands. So, look, here's the thing. You're going to have a perception of the market wants, But if the market opportunity is very clearly in a different direction, most often if you follow like the green light, if you like, and don't try and butt your head against the brick wall in front of a red light, like most often following that different direction towards where the demand is, that's likely to lead to success. I know it sounds obvious, but like, let's say, practically speaking, you developed a product which you think is highly sophisticated, aimed at high-end department stores and affluent consumers, but the market clearly tells you this product would fit better at a lower-end product with a lower-end presentation, a lower-end specification, and a much lower price point. Like follow the demand if you want to make sales, or you could dig your heels in, I guess, because that's not what you wanted to do originally and pass upon the opportunity because you know best, you know better than the market. Personally, speaking as a vulgar commercial soul who spent decades selling toys and games, as well as developing them, I'd rather have the sales in the bank. But obviously each to their own. On to number four. So number four, this is really important, but it's very obvious, which is lack of cash is a killer. So this should be like the least surprising tip of the 10 I'm going to share with you here. Cash flow, as we all know in business, is king or queen or whatever. We all know this. But the challenge is the elongated cash flow cycle of our business, of the world of toys and games, can be really hard for new companies to comprehend and handle. So let's say, for example, I'm recording this in September 2024, and if you start selling now to like mass market retail, for example, and you get your product listed by these people, you might actually be shipping it in a year's time. So they will be receiving the product a year from now in September 2025. And if you're lucky, you'll get paid 30 to 60 days after that, after they receive the product. That's the standard trading terms, although it can be better and it can be worse. So you could be looking at an extended 14-month cash flow cycle. So you have to fund your entire operation, if you have any staff, if you have offices, etc., for 14 months before you start to get any cash back in. So you can't act like it's a surprise when you've got no money left in the bank next, June, July, August. You've been warned it's a long cycle. Okay, please, please, please take account of that. But then think about this as well. What happens if things don't go to plan? Like they often won't. I'm telling you, as someone who's walked this path, they don't. Like nearly all the time, they don't go to plan. The saying is, man plans and God laughs. I think that applies with startups particularly. So let's say you launch some new products, and there's something that's enough for you to carry on, but like they fail badly in the first instance, and they just won't sell off the retail shelf or out of the e-commerce sites or whatever. Everyone experiences this over time. It's not just startups, like even established people. In the interest of transparency, I've been lucky enough to sell the most successful game of all time, but I also conceived and sold the worst selling game of all time, according to some of my my retail partners. So this does happen regardless of who you are. And when you bring a real dog of a product to market, your retailers are probably going to want clearance funding to help, mark down the price and clear out. You're then going to likely have some excess inventory. You're going to have to close out and sell at a loss. So like, what does your cash flow look like now heading into the next selling cycle after? I always advise clients that the decision to launch a new product line is, in effect, a decision to put at risk two selling cycles because it's, in effect, 2 years worth of cash flow that you're taking a risk on. So like, I guess the question is, bearing that in mind, does that change the importance of tip number two that I gave you, which is validating your products? Like, I think so. And certainly the most successful companies I know in this business spend nearly as much time and resources on validation as they do on creative development. Okay, tip number five, appropriate level of people for each stage of your company growth story. So when your business first starts, you'll find that you and whoever you start the business with are doing most of the work across the functions. In fact, in some cases, all of the work. Over time, to succeed, you need more people or more resources to effectively fulfill key functions based on what the organization needs at that point in its development. And one of the hardest balancing acts is to recruit great staff, but to manage your overhead so that you've got the right level of good people at the right time in your development. And you'll often have the last selling cycle's budget to fund the next selling cycle and next level ups kind of people that you need. So it's not easy. You've got to have the right people at the right time in your development. And at some point in time, you're going to need more discipline, more structure, and more processes, and the people that drive that. But if you introduce it too early, you can kill the entrepreneurial drive that you require to get the enterprise off the ground in the first place. So the other thing I would say is, like, my audience is global. So please bear in mind employment laws and practices vary across countries a lot. So the following advice I'm going to give you has to be tempered with local laws and employment regulations and what's considered good practice. But the smaller your headcount is, the more critical each person in the company is. So that you'll never have a more important hire than the first person you hire outside of the founders, for example. So, if it's the thousandth person your company's hired, it's so much less important, so much less critical. It's not unimportant, but it's just not as important and as pivotal in the company's growth story. And look, this is a really hard thing to say on one level, but if you find you've made a recruitment mistake early on, the more hard-nosed you are about correcting that mistake and in effect trying to move that person on, whether that involves you helping them find the next thing or whatever else, like the better the chances are that you're going to make it out of startup phase. I've had this myself. Like I'm not kidding here. I speak from like experience, and I can say now with like no emotion in this, but like I've been the right person in a role in the early days, and then I've grown the business or helped grow the business to the point where I was no longer the right person to manage it. I've also hired people who saw the role that they started in outgrow their experience and level of performance. That's normal. And so you've got to be really good at managing that, even if it's uncomfortable and basically unpleasant. Like I never, the worst thing I've ever done in my working life is to have to tell people that their job roles are no more that we're moving them on. It's horrible. It's horrible in every way. It's not easy to decide that someone who was right for the company originally is no longer a fit for the job role that was created around them. But it happens, and the better you are at managing that scenario, the more likely it is you'll go through the phases successfully. Sometimes you can find people new roles. Sometimes you might have to hire someone above them, and you have to amalgamate them in. And you reward that loyalty. Sometimes there's just no place in the organization anymore. The same thing happens with founders. You often see founders move themselves out of the day to day once it goes beyond their kind of, managing the business goes beyond their competency or their core competency, or there's just someone better to do it. So if you and anyone else you founded the business with are not focused on or good at sales, for example, like I would always seriously consider over recruiting and overpaying for a salesperson who's got a good track record, who is hungry for sales and bonuses, who has strong existing buyer relationships, as well as a knowledge of how the retail buying system works. If you wanted one tip from this newsletter, which would represent literally one like pressing of the fast forward button, metaphorically speaking, it'd be this one: hire, um, you know, better salespeople than you can probably afford. Obviously, you have to be able to pay them, but normally that'll be the best investment you make if you hire well. So, and I guess this leads me on to point number 6, which is this: focus on what will make the biggest difference to the growth of the business, the stability of the business, the longevity of the business, not on the things that you like to do or want to do. If you want to run like a hobby business, that's one thing. If you want to build a business that is more than just you and what you want to do and becomes its own entity, focus on what the business needs, not on what you want and need. And that's difficult for a lot of founders. Like often, it's so often that I will talk to a startup founder, and they'll talk to me about obsessing about non-critical details. So, like over time, successful founders will recruit people to do the tasks and to run the functions they're not good at. That's like obvious, which also explains why oftentimes, if you've got 2 or 3 founders, you end up with a successful business because responsibilities are usually carved out early on, and the business begins with 2 or 3 people being pulled around in their own slice of the pie instead of being pulled like one person being pulled across everywhere. But aside from all that, in terms of priority, there are only 3 things that matter when you start your business. 1, sell. 2, sell. 3, sell. Okay, it's a corny cliche to say there's 3 things, but it's only one thing. But it's so important, it needs reiterating. If you don't sell anything, like there's no business, regardless of how nice your product looks or how much you've, gone over the concept, etc., etc. Um, like, yeah, obviously you need the product before you can sell it, which needs some, great creative skills, sourcing, product selection skills. But the reality is that good salespeople can, and prevailingly, frankly, do sell average products. I know loads of great salespeople, and they would tell you if you ask them over a few beers, yeah, my products aren't always that brilliant. Like it's just the nature of this industry. There's loads of products, they come and go. But like you've got no business before you sell something. Routinely, I have to advise startup founders who are totally lost in the agonizing over the and navel gazing about the intricacies of packaging and manufacturing. I have to tell them, look, like agonizing over a production process when you've got no customers and no demand for your product is totally pointless. Eventually, you absolutely do need a safe certified product to ship from safe certified factories, but that's so far down the road for a completely new startup. It's almost irrelevant until you have some way, means, or like method to get some sales traction. The most successful companies focus on building momentum in the key areas and not in the less critical factors at that point in time. Look, I'm not trying to be a party pooper. If you just want to come up with cool ideas and execute their product development, then simple thing is you have to do is, unless you want it just to be art for your own sake, find other people or organizations to do your selling for you. There's loads of them out there. I do some of that. There's like 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 sales reps around the world. There's thousands of distributors, etc. But the harsh reality is this: there are hundreds of full-time salespeople with bags of experience, with lots of contacts in this industry, who are trusted by retailers, who still find it hard to persuade retailers to buy and list their products because it's so competitive. So, like, as a new market entrant, do you really think you can compete with these experienced full-time people, but more than that, like full-time teams in it, like the spare few moments you allow yourself after agonizing for days and weeks on product details, which won't matter if you can't sell the product? You've got to get real on this point to get successful. Point number seven, again, this is a really, really critical one for startups. Please, please, please manage inventory commitments with great care. It's so much easier to buy stock than it is to sell it. I am telling you now, speaking as someone who's, had a garage full of basically, unsaleable inventory, for my own ill-conceived ventures. As someone who's visited, like I've visited quite a few failing businesses, to help people do due diligence or whatever. And they often had excess inventory literally falling out of the windows of their warehouse. So my advice is, please order inventory with great care. It's so much easier to press the button on manufacturing than it is to actually sell it. Eventually, you're going to have systems and teams of people who you want to set up to argue and bicker with you about how much product you should order of which, SKUs and when. And that's going to help to make your inventory management process much more efficient. But to begin with, every purchase order you place is in effect an existential risk to your company. So you should treat the enormity of that decision to the appropriate level of due diligence. Okay, make it harder for yourself to order stock from your factories. Formalize the process, involve other people, perhaps even incentivize your sales teams by the level of inventory on hand as much as by sales achieved. That's how big toy and games companies structure their bonuses. Find someone who will act as a brake on placing inventory orders. Like in established companies, it's often someone from finance. Apologies to finance people, but you all know you love saying no. Um, but before you've got a business of a size which merits a finance person, let alone a finance department, you need some brakes built in somewhere, as well as some tailwinds when it comes to ordering inventory. It might be a spouse, it might be a parent, it could be anybody from your kind of contacts. It could be a company accountant. Um, in our industry, inventory expense, i.e., um, paying to manufacture the product and then ship it in, costs as much as a third of revenues. So it's like a huge cost, a huge proportion of your revenues. Don't get this wrong. Excess inventory literally kills toy and games companies. Okay, so now on to tip number 8. So yeah, look, congratulations. You've got a big break with a big opportunity. Now you need to put some eggs into other baskets. So we all know someone whose parents were never satisfied with whatever they did when they were children. Okay, these kids would do well at school, they'd perform some chore or win a competition in one of their hobbies or pastimes, and there'd always be one of their parents for whom it just wasn't enough and who always expected more. That's how successful toy and game startups then can behave. The first major breakthrough for a new company is so exciting for everyone involved. It creates an electric atmosphere in the company, and it creates momentum when dealing with external partners who suddenly pick up the phone to you and might even start chasing you for preview appointments. Um, Success in this business, again, I'm telling you from hard-earned experience, can be entirely transient. Many a company has launched a new toy to market and had a big hit for a year or two, only to see that successful product fade on out of the marketplace as consumers and retailers moved on to the next kind of big thing from other companies. So the more successful your products are, the more likely it is also that Me Too products at low prices will start to flood the market. And success is really, like, it's rarely permanent in this business. Products are only very, very, very occasionally perennial. So as soon as you have a success, please don't leave all your eggs in that basket. Milk that basket, expand that basket, but then spread the love and build up more eggs in more metaphorical baskets for the security and stability of your company. Number 9, um, really boring thing for a startup, but basically critical again. Beware of extending credit. Beware, like, not everybody pays their bills. Some fail to pay because they got a business or are struggling. For example, Toys R Us Inc., when they went bust, in the US, owed 130, reportedly, according to the LA Times anyway, reportedly owed $136 million to Mattel, 59 million to Hasbro, 33 million to Spin Master, and 32 million to Lego. So the bottom line is this: extending credit can be a massive risk for any company, but especially new companies. Now, there are ways around this. You can sell what's called FOB from the port or near the factory, so that in effect the retailer takes the product from you at the point of manufacture and pays you. Um, you can demand upfront payment of cash. You can use factoring and other credit instruments. You know, there's all those kind of things. Now, I've had plenty of issues due to people not paying their bills in my career, and every single one of those incidents, when it was a significant sum, caused severe problems of one kind or another. Whether that was cash flow impact for the business, you know, personal like ability to pay my household bills for me, or definitely on a few occasions limitations to my ongoing career prospects. So please, as a startup, be really wary of like blithely extending credit here, there, and everywhere. You might need some expert advice on this to get the best deals, to get the best format for what you need to make sure you get paid. Look, I'm telling you for sure, there's nothing more exciting than getting big orders from a big new customer. But there's also nothing as devastating as not getting paid for that order. And that's again from hard-won experience. Number 10, on a lighter note to end, trade shows are a critical pilgrimage in a toy and game business. People do business with people, even in this world and an age of AI. That cliche of people do business with people just about sums up the value of toy and game trade shows. You can tell via Amazon's algorithm and perhaps never have interacted with a real person. But much of the toy market still operates kind of exactly how it always has operated via interpersonal contact. Buyers need to get to know you to take your measure to work out if they can trust you and trust your company to be part of their supply chain. And the best way to meet buyers when you're a startup is via these trade shows because they're not looking for you. You'd have to be ridiculously good at creating industry PR for a buyer to bother to look for you. It's just not how they work. They have enough people trying to sell them things. So there's no better way to schmooze, sell, or display your wares than being at trade show. Over 25 years, most of my most successful results have been heavily influenced by or somehow derived from industry trade shows. The one thing that never, ever, ever gets cut in my schedule or in our company budget is trade show attendance. So you have to be efficient, obviously. If you're a typical toy and game business, I would suggest you might benefit from exhibiting at your home country trade show. If you're from, France, the French show, if you're Australia, etc. And if you still have budget after that, then the Spielwarenmesse in Nuremberg is typically the best place to meet international distributors and retailers from around the world. Even if you can't afford to exhibit, just attend. And after that, you kind of have to decide which trade shows work based on the needs of your business and your budget. I've published quite a lot of content on trade shows. So if you just type in, toy trade shows, Steve Reece, you'll find all kinds of other things I publish, podcast episodes, articles, etc. So yeah, so just to wrap up, let me finish by saying this: like all these tips come from a fairly jaded perspective. After a quarter of a century in this industry now and nearly 15 years of helping startups, you could be the company that breaks all the rules and books all these precedents that I'm kind of talking about. I hope you are in many ways, but I've seen like a couple hundred companies come into this market that I've advised at various stages of their journey. And there are very few who succeeded who didn't either adopt these 10 tips early in their journey or didn't do so, made mistakes, and then corrected their course accordingly. So yeah, look, I wish you well with your journey. Seeing newbies, new entrants that I've helped turn into the established furniture at trade shows on toy shelves and across the kind of the world of toys and games gives me huge professional pride and fulfillment and happiness. And sometimes one of my clients goes on to become a major player. There are numerous, reasonably major toy companies in the market now who I advised when they were less experienced. So you might just be there. You might be the next. So yeah, that pretty much wraps this up. Just a quick one. If you did want to get some directed kind of help and suggestions from me, we have our kind of entry point consultancy call service offers you the chance to ask any questions you've got about your business, your products, export markets, manufacturing, pretty much anything really about how to get ahead in the toy business or in the world of toys and games. We give you some additional contacts of key people from distributors to factories to product developers. So if you want to find out more on how that service works, just click kidsbrandinsight.com/services. And you can also sign up to our free Toy Industry Journal e-newsletter. Just go to toyindustryjournal.com and you'll see the link to sign up there. So yeah, that's all we've got time for. Thanks for listening. And If you do want to get in touch via any of those platforms, or if you want to follow further, that would be great. Good luck with your startup journey.